Hi there. We are back for our end of 2022 extravaganza on celebrity divorce issues. It's myself, it's Melissa McDonald, and this time we are going to talk about Tom Brady and Gisele Bundchen. I hope I pronounced that even remotely closely correctly. But I don't come across Brazilian international supermodels that often, so I don't have too much experience saying those names. Melissa, what is going on in the world of Tom Brady and Gisele? I know you have strong feelings on this one. Try to keep it family law related. No
I will
go.
try to I'll try to keep it family law related. I won't go into see, unlike most of the people we talk about, because I feel like a lot of the people we talk about are people that I either sort of like or, at least sort of respect their art, but I cannot stand Tom Brady. I hate Tom. I really dislike Tom Brady very
Let's not
strongly.
alienate our big Tom Brady viewing fans.
Who are those people? I mean, who? And I'm not a big fan of Gisele either, frankly. Like, she's not really my favorite either. But I don't necessarily have as strong of feelings. Being from Buffalo, being a Buffalo Bills fan, in parts, but it's not just that, because there are plenty. Whatever, I'll move on. So the big news with Tom and Gisele is there was a lot of speculation after Tom unretired because he's like can't not be playing football, apparently, even though he's like my age and has no business playing football. That was sort of like the death knell for their relationship. So Tom had famously retired and then famously unretired and is still like back there, sort of dustily quarterbacking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And there was a lot of speculation, and it turned out to be sort of it come to fruition that was going to be it, because Gisele apparently wanted him to not do that because playing football is, takes up a lot of time. And I will say, and Tom compared it to being deployed with the military, which, can we talk, that's incredibly offensive. Like, first of all, you're there voluntarily. You don't have no need to be there. Secondly, like, you aren't going overseas on a boat for 6 months with only like a video. I literally cannot.
You clearly feel strongly about Tom Brady.
I cannot even.
Okay.
Cannot even. So I guess sort of like, just sort of, here's my thoughts for you, that to bring this sort of away from Tom Brady and back to something, that we can talk about that without me having like my eyeballs explode. I think sort of an untapped thing potential for you with these videos is not, I don't have necessarily a lot of family law questions about Tom Brady and Gisele, because like they kind of came into court with a settlement and just it was very straightforward and not a lot of drama. It had all been worked out, as we've talked about in your prior videos, that there's good reason to not air your business. I do have thoughts on that. Like, there was something funny that happened in Maryland that we can sort of circle back to. So I think an untapped potential for you being a divorce attorney is, I feel like you probably know a lot and have a lot of thoughts about relationships and what works in relationships and what doesn't work in relationships.
What doesn't work?
What doesn't work? Yeah. Maybe by extension, then what does work? So do you see, with people coming in to you looking to break up their marriages? I mean, because Tom was not in a situation where he has to work a lot to support his family. This is not a situation where someone is like working 3 jobs to like keep a roof over their head. Like, he doesn't need to quarterback the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like, he's set for life between his endorsements, which God knows why you want him to endorse your product. Like, I'm not buying, I don't, whatever. But either way, like, between his endorsement money, between his money from his career, like, he probably still could get endorsement money, God knows why. But
he has apparently he's got a giant TV contract waiting for him.
Right. So which is, would it be a much more family friendly, sort of option for him?
Mm-hmm.
So there's no need for him to be, from like a financial standpoint, to be quarterbacking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is not like what is like keeping him out of like off the streets. So, this is his choice. Like, his choice is to be like, I'm going to be away from my children and away from my partner and not an active participant in this family for, however many months out of the year that I'm doing that, because I have to be intense and a weirdo about it. Like, and not eat strawberries and not eat nightshades and like, have a mistaken belief that if you're properly hydrated, you won't get a sunburn, which is not how skin or the sun or water works. But like,
question, please, less anti-Tom Brady commentary.
Okay. So is this something that you see coming up in your, that people just can't, do you see like this being a source of breakdown pretty commonly? People can't, one person, has focus like other, doesn't have the appropriate level of focus in their partner's view on the family and on the partnership.
Well, I think that question I would reframe just a little bit to, do I see a lot of divorces or family strife or potential divorces because two spouses have different interests, aren't on the same page, and perhaps different priorities? Not to say one priority is better than the other from my answer right now, but the answer is absolutely. And that's really far more of a common reason for people to end up in my office than any of like the really fun cocktail hour type of salacious scenarios. I mean, the scenario in which two people are, have been married a long time. I think Tom and Gisele have been married for like 13 years or something like that. The trap of falling into a business type relationship, two ships passing in the night type relationship, rather than kind of still focused on your partner, what your partner likes to do, finding joint activities, joint interests, pursuing those, obviously the romance and the passion. That's a very, very common, if not the most common reason why people end up in, I think, talking to family law attorneys. It's certainly not the ones that make the news really, but it's just a very common phenomenon, especially when you either have people that have completely different passions or interests. And I think Tom and Gisele would fall into that category. Tom is clearly maybe solely focused on football, and Gisele is a super amazingly accomplished woman in her own right, and their worlds don't really overlap other than kind of like the celebrity trappings of both of them. And then I think also when you have children, you can have different parenting philosophies, right? And different parenting philosophies, when they butt heads for a long, long time, can certainly lead to conflict that never gets resolved, and resentment and arguments and those types of things. And it gets harder as children grow older. Children are by nature a little bit more malleable and easy to manage when they're younger. They listen to their parents. Generally, they think their parents, your parents are, heroes in some cases. But as they become teenagers, they're kind of naturally inclined to rebel, to push away, to get out of the nest, and it becomes harder to parent them. And then the harder parenting issues when you have two different parenting styles, or maybe in Gisele's case, one parent is shouldering the load of doing the difficult parenting stuff, or even if it's not difficult parenting things, just being a sole single parent is hard as hell. And I tell people that when they come into my office, when they might be seeking to be kind of like the parent that's primarily in charge of the children, like, are you sure you want that? Like right now, do you realize that everything you're doing would be solely your responsibility? And going the other way, when someone wants to share custody, like, are you sure you can handle the responsibilities that maybe your wife or your husband previously were doing? Like, if you never really got involved with two children and dinner time and bath time and homework routine, do you know what you're getting into? Not to say that that person can't learn how to do it, or if they're willing, but sometimes they don't even think about that. Sometimes they'll come into my office and say, I need this amount of custody because that's my right. Well, what does that look like? And are you really prepared to do that? And really think about that. So Gisele very easily could be in a situation where she's like, get your butt back here and help me with these kids. And if you're not, then I'm going to go do some things that make me happy, and it doesn't involve being a cheerleader in the owner's box for the Patriots or the Buccaneers.
There's not enough money in the world to pay me to, anyway. But I think there's sort of two separate things there.
Sure.
There's the do we have sort of common interests, which I think maybe like that's something that to some extent, like, you should have known this from the outset. Like, this person, someone like Tom Brady has always been this way. Like, this is, he's famously like a workaholic. He famously has like these like, the weird like health things, although she has the weird health things too. So maybe that's something they have in common. But I mean, to some extent, like, do you think people enter into relationships thinking that the other person is going to sort of magically change, or maybe not even thinking about like the long term, how are we going to mesh together? Like, I think you need to think about that.
People don't. People do think people will change. People
don't change.
Always project out what a certain behavior might look like or make them feel like years in advance. That's a very difficult thing to really do and to quantify. And the other thing that I think also happens, and I use this example with my clients all the time, especially when they first come into my office, is that your perspective about one of your partner's behaviors can change over time. Very simple simple example to look at is like, if you met your partner in college or post-college, right after post-college, and not a lot of responsibilities are going on, and it's just kind of young and having fun, that partner, and this is just an easy general example, maybe your partner liked to drink a lot in their 20s. And like in their 20s, you're like,
that's fine in your 20s.
Yeah, it doesn't really, no real major impact. Our friends do it. We're drinking socially, whatever. 15
but that
years
very
later,
quickly becomes not fine.
If you're 40 and drinking like a 24-year-old, it's everyone's perspective on that behavior changes. It might be the exact same behavior, but the perspective on it changes, and also kind of what the reflection is of the person engaging in the behavior it can be entirely different. So it sometimes, and very frequently, and I think alcohol is an easy example, again, I've said that a couple times, is that, you say, oh, so-and-so likes to party, and then, I'm tired of something, like 5 years later, I'm tired of this, you need to change. And then 10 years later, you're like, how are you still doing this? It's so destructive, like you're not helping me with this, and it's affecting this, that, and the other thing. And then you realize, oh, maybe it wasn't just they were doing it for fun 20 years ago, maybe it's an actual problem. And you could substitute lots of things in for alcohol in that example. People's perspectives on a certain behavior can change. I mean, I've seen it with like abusive behavior. So-and-so it was always a yeller and a screamer, but I thought they would kind of grow out of it. Or so-and-so would only punch the wall or push me when they were young and they were mad. But like, if the behavior continues forever, it's no longer kind of an isolated incident, it's a pattern. And then of course, I always tell my clients, don't blame yourself, because now in hindsight, you look back and you say, oh, it wasn't an isolated incident. It wasn't like something I should have overlooked. It should have been a giant red flag, and I'm stupid for not realizing it. I think that's a heavy burden to place on people. But yeah, I see it all the time.
And I think probably having children really changes that calculus too.
Absolutely.
Like it might be sort of cute and, sweet to have, like, if you're a woman and you're with a guy who's sort of hapless and you have to take care of him, and like, oh, isn't that cute? Isn't that sweet? That's something that, like, is a very like sort of projected and media, like, whatever. And you add some children in the mix and you're like, I have a third toddler here. Like, why I can't do this. And it will be easier for me to have this person not in my life, is there than it is to have like to take care of someone else as well. I mean, do you think that like, do you see that as being like and how can you work that out? Like, is there a way to work that out in advance? Like, that, one person like is going to wind up shouldering all the parenting responsibility versus.
Well, let me make a distinction. Lots of families that I've seen divide and conquer certain tasks, including parenting, successfully. Mm-hmm. Some partners are great with children and some partners are not, but that doesn't necessarily mean they end up in a divorce attorney's office, right? I mean, some of the best long-lasting relationships are relationships where like you meet your partner's weaknesses and you cover for those, and they meet your weaknesses and they cover for yours. So some of those relationships work great. Others don't, and it's hard. I think it's hard to fix, right? Because I think we're really talking about intrinsic character qualities, and it's very difficult, if impossible, for people to change intrinsically their like genetic makeup as to who they are. But I think I've said this before talking to you, in my line of work, I've seen, people don't make giant changes to who they are, but what seems like mundane or small changes can make a world of difference. So you can get into, if you both embrace it, some form of family or marriage counseling where, you can maybe do one thing differently that makes your spouse happy, and then kind of like everything realigns and like you can make it work. Because no marriage is without its flaws and its difficulties and its challenges. It's just kind of a little bit of like tolerance for the impact of those challenges and difficulties, really.
Well, you have to be willing to meet the person, sort of, you have to be willing to meet them where they are, if you can, and willing to sort of communicate about it. Like, you can't like silently resent your partner for not like ever doing bath time or whatever. If you don't say anything, like,
Well, and to bring it back to Gisele and Tom, right? It seemed like Gisele and Tom were on the same page. Like, he retired, he was done. Which seemed like, from an outsider's perspective, seemed to be a family focused type of thing. I think he referenced his family when he made his retirement statement. He unretires, and like, from all the news reports, it was clear as day that made Gisele real mad and seemed to be ultimately the source of their demise. But so that can be that. That tension that maybe Gisele and Tom were feeling gets exacerbated by Tom kind of like maybe hearing her, agreeing with her, and then changing his mind
like,
in a way that
just kidding.
Well, it changed
do what I want
in a way that I could easily see Gisele feeling as a very selfish thing. Like,
sure, of course.
But on Tom's, I could also easily see Tom's perspective on why he would get back into it. I might also just be consoling him, like, well, you should also expect your wife to be hella pissed off.
Right. If that's something you guys have agreed on, and then you go back on it because that's what you feel like doing, because
let me bury this deep into our Tom.
No, I do want to talk about, I know what's coming, and I really want to talk about this.
Okay. So I was kind of getting ready for this. I was reading into kind of what was going on with Tom and Gisele, and I came across like a conspiracy theory, which I could give some credence to here.
Well, we love conspiracy theories. Like, you love conspiracy. I love conspiracy theories.
Tom and Gisele's divorce is a fabricated in the media type of event. They actually did get divorced, don't get me wrong, but it's because they are trying to protect themselves and insulate themselves from their exposure in this FTX cryptocurrency scandal, in which Tom Brady and Gisele were both paid spokespeople and took an equitable stake in this company that went from like 30 billion or some crazy number to essentially zero overnight. And like, everybody washed out of it. Everyone has lost all their investment, including them, presumably. And so the theory goes that what they're trying to do is kind of dump all their assets into one of them. And I'm not privy to their agreement or anything like that, but essentially to protect the family assets from this disaster of the FTX crypto crash.
Does that work? Isn't that fraud? Maybe that's beyond the scope. Maybe that's beyond the scope of your.
I'll just say this.
It sounds like fraud to me.
I'll make an analogy that I think most people would go, "Oh, okay." Silver divorces. It's not uncommon for two elderly people or their children to come into a family law attorney's office and say, the cost of taking care of my parents or this couple is just absolutely sapping the financial resources of the family. And we can't get government assistance or benefits because we have too much assets. They're gonna basically take all the assets of the family first, and before government assistance or benefits and coverages kick in. But maybe one spouse has a life expectancy much longer than the other and needs to be protected in different ways. Can we get divorced and transfer assets to one of the elderly couple or not?
Can you?
I'm not going to necessarily answer with specific knowledge. I'm going to say I think that does happen.
Because it sounds like fraud.
What's that?
It sounds like fraud to me.
It could be
from the criminal lawyer perspective. Like, but then how do you prove it? Like, how do you prove?
Well, right.
From a criminal.
I mean, you know, it depends on the facts of every single situation. But I'll just say people come in with this question all the time. How can we do what's best for our family under these circumstances? And you know, I think you've also seen kind of a notorious, like, on the other side, people get married so that their spouse can't like testify against them. So like people use the laws of marriage and divorce to their advantage, sometimes for completely legitimate purposes, sometimes for purposes that you know, the criminal attorneys in us might go, that's not a good idea.
Now that doesn't. I would absolutely recommend that people get married to avoid testifying, but like, that's you know, but that only doesn't really work in DV cases. Sort of fun fact. Well, not really fun. That's not very fun. But you only get one. I think they changed the statute recently.
They did, but I think the Court of Appeals might have taken up that issue again recently.
Yeah.
So like, it's an ever-changing point of law, and like, no matter what, just a couple of years ago, people were getting married to avoid testifying against their spouse.
Yeah. Well, certainly in other criminal cases, that'll absolutely work. Like in a drug case, that'll definitely work. But in a DV case, I think they changed the statute because the stuff I do is like looking back, so I don't know. Sometimes it like takes some trickle down to me. But you used to get, and this is bizarre, but you used to get one. You get one. You can invoke the privilege once in a DV case against your spouse, which to me is like, I mean, how is that? Whatever. But you get one. It's like the one dog bite rule. Like
we're gonna do one.
You get one DV. I mean, there's other, you know, there's other sort of privileges, you know, if there's, you know, potentially the Fifth Amendment, whatever. That's sort of aside from the point. But Tom Brady does. I mean, the crypto stuff, like, you know, Dave's like real, you know, we were not doing that FTX stuff, but Dave's really into like the crypto stuff, and that's like a whole, you know, been a whole sort of rigmarole. But Tom Brady does love a scam. Like, remember that TB12 like health thing that he was doing that was like a total scam?
Tom Brady, I think, strikes me as the guy that's so competitive that he's willing to like fight things and try like creative ways to get around things, like loopholes. I mean, Deflategate, if you remember, he got rid of his cell phone. Like they couldn't find, like he like threw it in a lake or just like disappeared. I mean, he seems like he's willing to like push things to the limit. You bring up to the TB12, like the Patriots were paying TB12's like company for like training support, but Tom Brady was receiving a low salary, but like he was also getting compensated that way, but it didn't account against the salary cap. Like he strikes me, that's what I kind of bring into this conspiracy theory, because he strikes me as the type of guy that's like, yeah, we're doing that. We're gonna get around this. We're gonna beat it. Because rules don't apply to me. I'm gonna get around these rules. Don't apply to me. I'm gonna get around these rules. Like, I guess, you know, you're gonna take it from a more, you know, but I'm not giving him the benefit of the doubt because I can't stand him. I'm not giving him because I can't stand him. I can't stand him. Noted for the viewership. I hope I've made that point like extremely clear. You have, and I think with that we're gonna end it. If you guys like this video, if you like the anti-Tom Brady comments of my very dear friend Melissa, smash that like button. Certainly comment. You can tell her that you disagree, and share this video with any of your friends. Thank you all very much. We're going to try to do this more often. Have a healthy and happy New Year, everybody. People are feel free to disagree. They're not going to change my mind.